It seems like everyone is talking about large language models.
You hear the term constantly, in the news, in product launches, pretty much everywhere. But almost all of those conversations miss the single most important word in that phrase.
That one word, large, it's the real key to understanding how these things work, both their incredible power and, you guessed it, their biggest weaknesses. So what does large actually mean here?
Well, it means these models are trained by reading a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean vast, almost unimaginable amounts of text that's been pulled from all corners of the internet. By sifting through all of that data, they start to learn the patterns of human language, how we connect words, sentences, and ideas.
The scale we're talking about is just staggering. Some of the biggest models have over 1 trillion parameters. The best way to think of a parameter is like a tiny adjustable knob. And with 1 trillion of these knobs to tweak, the AI can fine-tune its understanding of language to a mind-boggling degree. That's what lets it do things like generate text, summarize articles, and translate languages.
But this massive scale creates a huge paradox. For the model to get smarter, it needs to eat a ridiculous amount of data. But for its answers to actually be trustworthy, that data has to be super high quality. And yeah, those two things are often fighting against each other.
On the one hand, more data means more examples, which helps the model learn about all sorts of different topics. But if that data is low quality, full of errors, weird biases, or just plain internet garbage, the model learns all the wrong things. It's the classic garbage in, garbage out problem.
And this is why you'll hear people in the industry talk about finding the Goldilocks zone. The goal isn't just to shovel in more data. The real trick is finding the right data. Not so much that it's full of noise, and not so little that the model can't learn anything. It has to be, well, just right.
So what happens when the data isn't just right? Well, when a model trains on imperfect information, it doesn't just learn the facts, it also memorizes every single flaw. And this leads to a couple of really big problems. The first one is something called hallucination. This is when the AI confidently just makes stuff up. It generates text that sounds perfectly fluent and correct, but it's actually completely false or nonsensical.
The second major issue is algorithmic bias. If the training data contains stereotypes or unfair representations of people, which, let's be honest, a lot of internet text does, the system doesn't just learn those biases, it can actually amplify them, leading to outputs that are skewed and unfair.
Now, to fight these problems, developers don't just dump raw data into the machine and hope for the best. It's actually a really careful and ongoing process of curation.
This is a very active process. We're talking about intensive data cleaning to get rid of errors and duplicates. They also use really smart techniques like active learning, where the model itself can point to the data it's most confused by and needs help with. And there's a huge, deliberate effort to make sure the data is diverse and to use special tools to hunt down and reduce those biases. Okay, but here's where it gets really weird. Even with all these challenges, the sheer scale of these models produces something totally unexpected, abilities that go way beyond just recognizing patterns.
As these models get bigger, they start showing off what researchers call emergent abilities. These are skills nobody explicitly programmed into them, things like complex, multi-step reasoning, or even being able to identify offensive content. And the wild part is, these abilities often only seem to pop into existence once a model crosses a certain size threshold.
At the end of the day, it's helpful to think of an LLM like a student whose entire knowledge of the world comes from one single enormous library it was given access to. All of its brilliance, all of its skills, and all of its blind spots are a direct reflection of what was in that library.
And that leaves us with a pretty important question to think about. When we see these models producing falsehoods or echoing biases, we're essentially looking at a reflection. If an AI is trained on our collective words, what do its flaws really reveal about the state of our own information?